Alright, welcome back. This is lesson 1 video 5, a real-time example of the 3/4 view of the lay-in. Hopefully, you watched the full video of explaining every single line, the lay-in, and you actually did some examples yourself. So now that you're watching this, you can kind of see some of the things that you might be doing wrong. And today I'm going to show you how I drew this in real time. I'm going to try to talk about all the decisions that I'm doing, why I'm drawing whatever I'm drawing. But if I skip something, make sure you pay attention to my brush size, pay attention to where I raise my lines, pay attention to kind of like with which lines I start first, and just kind of subtle things like that. So don't just only watch the drawing itself, but just watch the whole process. So let's get started. I'm gonna erase this layer right here. I'm gonna create a new layer, get the color red. Let me load my tools though, because I forgot about that. Alright, got the sketch brush, got the color red, and I'm gonna start doing the tracing. Starting out with that initial circle, gonna need at least a couple of different circles to get it right. Alright, that's good enough. I'm gonna move the top of it a little bit lower, so thinking about where the skull is. I'm following the head and I'm imagining the head. I think that's good enough for now. Now I'm trying to get that side oval, thinking about the corner of the eyebrow, and then I'm trying to kind of build it up on the sides. So see how, like, first of all, I'm staying super zoomed out, right? Super zoomed out. And then I'm pressing super lightly because I'm still not very sure about my lines. Then I connect the end of the ear to the corner of the eyebrows. Connect, find the angle of the eyebrows, then the center line, then kind of, fade away some of these lines right here. Find away the line for the nose, find away the line for the chin, line for the hairline. Then I'm looking for the arch. Couple of times doing the arch using the Control Z to make sure I get a good angle, and then kind of erasing it, so keeping everything super clean. Then we have the eye area. So for the eye area, or maybe the jaw first, let's do actually the jaw and the ear. So in here, maybe first of all the jaw, right? That back line, the corner of the jaw right here, and that other line in here. For the other side, where is the corner of the cheekbone? Right here, boom. Another line, boom. A couple of times to nail it down. Erasing this little corner. See how I still stay zoomed out. Erasing this line. And before I even start, like, for example, drawing this here, I'm gonna erase some of the lines in here so it don't become too messy. Then kind of going with like a little oval for the ear. Creating more of a straight line on this side. Remember, the ear is right above the jaw. Then going into the eye area, looking for this angle to kind of connect the, with the jaw, with the arch. And then I'm looking at this point right here. This is a really important thing to understand. I'm looking at this blue line dot, and I'm looking at this green dot. And then I'm looking at the angle that they're making, and I'm thinking, is it matching the perspective of this line? So if this actually goes down here and the blue dot is all the way up in here, and this purple line was the actual angle, that would be incredibly wrong, because these two lines, they're not really parallel to each other. So because they're so close, they would actually have to be parallel. So when I look at where the arch is connecting with the eye area angle, I make sure that on the other side, with that other side right here, this corner right here is kind of matching the same sort of angle. And as you might see, I actually need to bring it up a little bit and maybe bring up the arch as well. That might happen, a lot of times, is that you might bring up a line, so you fade it away and just redraw it again. Now I'm kind of looking for that angle. Boom, that's a good angle. Kind of cleaning up these lines over here, cleaning up over here for the nose. Now see this line over here, I'm zooming in just to kind of show you. This line in here is actually from the initial circle, but it doesn't really match exactly where the angle of the eye area is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna erase all of the other lines, and then I'm do a very confident line now because I'm much more confident about the angle of the eye area. So at first I was just using that initial circle to kind of help me, in general, to kind of find that. But then when I kind of get, smaller and smaller into the planes, I become more confident in my lines. I become more confident in my positions. Then we kind of have the nose. So in here, I'm going to fade out these lines over here. So I'm always painting through the whole thing, like I only think about the step right now. So I'm not thinking like 5 steps ahead and being like, oh, where am I need to erase that? Like I just draw this thing. Then when I get to the nose, now I fade it away. I don't fade it away before I start actually doing the nose. Do the horseshoe shape for the nose first, or something like this. Then find the bottom plane of the nose, something like that. Going like this, then connect the eye area, connect it down to the nose, and then looking for the circle of the mouth, right? Think about how the whole circle is going around the mouth, right? It's going around the whole head. It's not just like that on the side, like a little C, but it's really a bow. I might not draw the whole bow, because if you draw it, it's gonna kind of stand out on this side, and that's not what you're really looking for. But I still think about how it's wrapping around. So I'm doing the motion of the circle wrapping around. I just don't really draw it the whole way, because it's not pointing out. Like if you look at it, it's just very subtly pointing out. It's not that much. Then I'm looking for the eyeballs, so I'm gonna fade away these lines right here. Looking for the eyeballs, make sure you have the right size. So looking at the tear duct, from the tear duct to the corner of the eye. See, that wasn't a good circle, so I'm gonna fade it away. See the size of the brush I'm using? Pay attention to that. Like look at how I might change it depending on whatever I'm drawing. Now I'm making it smaller because I see that in here it might be like a smaller line. Now I'm fading it away. I'm redrawing it. See how many times I'm actually repeating it? Like I'm very subtle with it. It's not like I'm looking for the most perfect circle ever. And if it's not the perfect, I just need to redraw it again and again. Like I just find a good one, and then I slowly start building it up and up and up. And then I use the eraser. I clean it up. Then I erase it more. Then I erase it more. Then I build it up. So it's a whole process between using the brush and the eraser. Then we have, so in here, just kind of connecting some of the lines, cleaning up some of the stuff. So something like this. Then we have making sure to repeat. So now that we have the eyeballs, we're a lot more sure of the eye area. So I'm going around and I'm kind of repeating all the lines, and I'm making the connection around the nose. I'm connecting this, I'm kind of repeating the eyeballs. You also might want to turn off the layer just to check how your lines are going in the tracings. In the tracings, you're not looking for perfect lines, but it's still kind of cool to see how they're doing. Alright, now we have, let's do the neck for now. So the neck in here, as we talked about it, imagine how it's really going to connect all the way back in here. It's not just 2 lines. So imagine how it's proceeding back and it's really connecting to the back of the head. And then I'm really imagining the perspective. So this circle right here is really going to go around. And then that circle for the forehead. And then that second circle for the mouth. And again, for the circle of the mouth, it's not just like a C going from here to here, but it's really going around the whole thing. So imagine how it's really wrapping around, and then it's wrapping around to the other side. So something like that. Alright, I'm just kind of going over the lines just to kind of repeat them, make them a little bit more obvious. And again, what is the tracing about? Just to kind of see where all the lines are going to be. So we're doing these tracings just to imagine, make sure that we have good lines, but also make sure to imagine where all the lines are going to be sitting in, in this reference. Oh, I actually forgot the oval for the chin. So going in here, doing an oval for the chin, and imagining that. All right, so that's it for tracing. Oh, I forgot the line for the nose. Now let's do the freehand after the tracing. And by the way, if you struggle with kind of like finding, you know, some of the lines, or it's kind of hard for you to imagine all these forms, you can actually look at the model. You can put it right on the side when you're drawing, so you can also use it as a reference. So make sure you also do that if you really struggle and it's kind of like your first time doing this. All right, let's do the guidelines now. So for the guidelines, you know, I'm creating a new layer, holding shift, and then I'm trying to go for a line for the eyebrows, one for the nose, one for the mouth, one for the chin, one for the hairline, right? Just to see where they at. I'm gonna be switching it, turning it on and off just to check my progress and if I'm going in the right direction. Now starting a new layer, and we're gonna finally start the freehand drawing. Starting out with a few circles. I think that's good enough, something like that. Let's check how it is in, so I'm looking at the tracing and I'm seeing if it kind of matches the tracing, because you know in the reference itself we still don't really know exactly where the initial circle is. So we use the tracing to kind of guide us and let us know that circle, it might be like too high or too low. And by the way, if it's just a little bit too high, you know, you can just kind of move it with the move tool. So just grab the move tool and just move it a little bit. You know, I mean, it's better if you just kind of redraw it at the beginning just so you can kind of practice more circles. But if it's just like a tiny bit, there's nothing wrong with you just moving it. Now going around for that side circle, trying to imagine where it's going to be sitting. Remember, we still don't really know any of the, like, if any of these lines are correct for sure, so it's just guessing. Then I'm trying to look at this angle right here, you know. So I'm trying to imagine I'm looking at this angle, I'm looking at this angle, and then I'm trying to match the same angle myself. Then looking at this angle right here, and trying to imagine the center line. So I'm going with like a slight curve. I'm trying to look at the reference. I'm trying to look at the tracing. What is that curve, right? See, this is too straight, so it needs to be a little bit slightly curved. So that's a good line, but now it's too thick. So I'm just kind of fading it away because it's gonna very soon become super messy. And then I'm going back, I'm repeating some of the lines if it needs to. Right, so I'm not rushing this. Like, I'm taking my time, and I really wanted to kind of take you one step at a time slowly, just to kind of show you how, like, I feel like a lot of people are rushing this and they like so worried about the next step. Like, try to constantly look at the whole picture, look at the whole drawing, and check if you're actually doing well. All right, now let's find the nose. So in here, I'm trying to imagine where the nose would be sitting, the angle of the nose. So it's slightly going to be going this way, but very slightly, and then the chin would be down here. Now I'm turning on my guidelines just to check. See, I nailed that shit. I nailed the nose, I nailed the chin. See, the eyebrow line is a little bit low though. So turning off the guidelines, and then, you know, I'm erasing that and then bringing them back. And as we talked about in the proportions, again, it's not talent. It's just that I've been doing this for so long that my guesses are better than your guesses. Why? Because I've developed hand and eye coordination. How you do that? But just doing it over and over and checking your guidelines and then doing more and more, and then you just become really good at guessing. All right, now after we have that, let's look at the kind of like the jaw in here. So the jaw, imagining that line in here in the middle. And by the way, if you kind of really struggle with finding some lines or the angle, you can always go back to the tracing and kind of do a very long line to imagine like, what is that angle of the jaw right here, right? It's not super straight like this. So I'm going in here, I'm imagining like a super long line, right? So that would be the angle. So I'm going in here, I'm trying to imagine the same angle and where it's going to really touch that oval. Is it going to be right in the middle? Is it going to be more towards the left, more towards the right? If you look at this oval right here, that's why, by the way, it's not great to completely erase all of your lines in the tracing, because you're going to need them to kind of measure the freehand. So if you look at this oval, where is the jawline kind of touching that oval, right? If the oval right here is in the middle, that jaw is going to be touching it on the left, and that's going to be the space between the middle of the oval and then the jaw. So I'm looking at mine, trying to imagine that middle line, and right here, I'm imagining where the jaw is going to be, maybe a little bit slightly to the right. And then I'm going for that bottom one. Then I'm doing, at the beginning I might do only one line, so something like that, very simple, just to check how it's going, and then when I'm very sure, I can break it down into two different lines. All right, I think that's good enough for us to check on top of the reference. Again, if this is your first time doing it, or you're still like a big beginner, you might need a lot more to kind of check on the reference. So see, I'm putting it on top of the reference. What do I find? First of all, it's way too wide. Like, look at all this space. Look at all the space in here, look at all the space in here, and then the jaw is way too low. So I bring it back, Control Z, and then I start to rework it. So what we learn from that is that there's way too much space on the left, too much space onto the right. So see, I'm not perfect at this. Like, I still do mistakes, you know. So you check the reference, see how you're doing, then bring it over. All right, let's check it now. See, it's still too wide. Still too wide. So I'm trying to imagine where is the problem coming from. So if I push it all the way, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm trying to push it all the way to the left, and see then the jaw and then the whole left side of the head is going to be wrong. So I'm gonna have to fix all of that. But if I push it all the way to the right, then I'm gonna have to fix all of that, including the chin. So I try to put it somewhere in the middle and imagine, you know, both sides. So in here, I'm gonna have to fix this line and put it a little bit slightly to the left, and then fix these lines in here, put it slightly to the right, and then the whole kind of corner of the of the eyebrow needs to be slightly more to the right. All right, so we took some mental feedback, and we kind of go back and try to sort of fix all the lines. So we're erasing them. Now that you have these lines, you know, it's a lot easier to actually, you know, try to imagine where they're gonna be, because you already have the initial ones. See, I would never thought that the face would be so kind of narrow. Like, I'm used to a lot more, you know, wider faces, but you know, the reference is the judge of that. So you can't, you know what I'm saying, nothing can trump the reference. So fixing the joint here, using the eraser. Notice how I'm constantly making that eraser from big to small, depending on what I'm erasing. All right. Now going back to the reference. See, now it's better. Now it's better, but in here in the back, and then this angle in here for the jaw is wrong. So if you look at the angle of the jaw, now that's where we kind of like, you know, this is a lot more right. So we can actually split it into two different lines. So one in here, one line, and then two lines, instead of just kind of like one gentle line. So in here, I'm going for the angle of the jaw like that, and then the cheekbone a little bit like that. Now let's do the eye area actually first. Let's look at the angle of the eye area. So something like this, trying to sort of match it. Then do another line like that. Oops, that was way too high. So see, needs to match sort of this angle right here. Doing a couple of times, erasing, matching the angle in the bottom. See, now, is that too high? You know, there's so many things that you constantly need to be aware of. So when I do this, not only do I look at the angles in here, but I'm looking at the space from this line to this line. You know, I'm looking at the tracing. What is the space between this and this? Is it the same as mine? See, mine is actually a little bit higher. Mine is, you know, the space is too high. So I'm gonna erase it. I'm gonna make it a lot smaller. So something like that. All right, let's bring it back to the reference. All right, that's a lot better, even though the back is still way too fat. So in here, I'm gonna have to take a little bit more from the back. And by the way, it doesn't have to still be perfect, because there's still so many lines that we need to, you know, put on top of this drawing. But just make sure that it's good enough, that there's no any big mistakes that later are gonna trump you up. Like in here for the jaw, for example, it's way too low. So I'm gonna have to erase that and kind of get it higher. And in the process of you constantly erasing and building up your lines, not only do you get better at, you know, perspective, because you're constantly measuring angles, you get better at proportions because you're constantly looking, and you also get better at lines because you're doing it over and over again. That's why this exercise is so good. And here, looking for the shape of the ear, and now I'm gonna go for that arch, right? And then looking at this cheekbone line in here, something like that. Let's bring it over to the reference. All right, that's kind of cool. Let's look at the guidelines. I think the whole drawing needs to get rotated a little bit to the left. So I'll just Control T and then I'll rotate it a little bit to the left. So if it's slight adjustments like that, you can use some tools, you know, for example, moving it a little bit to the left, or moving the whole drawing to the right, or, you know, rotating or not rotating. The bad thing is if you try to, you know, rotate every individual line. So it's bad if you try to lasso to this line right here and you try to, you know, rotate it to the left, to the right, instead of you just trying to, you know, erase it and do a new one, because then you're kind of limiting yourself out of the experience. If it's just a small change that you need to kind of like move your whole drawing, then there's nothing really wrong with that. Alright, so I'm cleaning up my lines. I'm making sure that the whole drawing is looking 3D, because right now it looks kind of whack. Right now it kind of looks like it's really gonna fall apart. So I'm kind of building up my lines, and you know, remember your whole drawing is going to change through the whole process. So you need to constantly just think about how can it be better, and it also needs to look good in every single stage. Like, it doesn't need to be perfect or anything, but just needs to be good. You know, like you have to just kind of keep your wits. Like, you just can't have like a messiness and expect that all of a sudden it's gonna turn good. Like, it has to look good throughout the whole way. So you're slowly building that up. Alright, let's do the neck now. Now that we're kind of like more sure of the proportions. So in here I'm looking at where the neck is gonna, you know, connect to the ear. So something like this. And then where the neck is gonna touch the chin, something like that. And then thinking about that rotating curve going from one point to the other point. Let's flip the canvas actually to freshen up the perspective, see what's going on. Let's do the guidelines on the flipped canvas. Now see, when I rotated that, I might have kind of fucked up some things. So in here, this eyebrow line is going this way, and in the reference it's actually supposed to go that way. So that's a pretty big mistake. So in here, fading it away, drawing oh sorry, I forgot to turn off the guidelines. You should not do that. Alright, going in here, changing the angle, erasing, changing the line below that so you can kind of, you know, go downwards, follow this line right here, and make sure you're repeating this line, fading it away. There's going to be so much just kind of fading away and repeating lines, and try to really enjoy that process. Like, I mean, I know it's not the most enjoyable thing ever, but you know, you're really just building the whole construction. It's not like you're just kind of like doing a perfect line after a perfect line. It's really you just kind of finding your own mistakes and kind of doing stuff over and over again. Alright, let's flip it back. Let's bring it back to the reference to see how we're doing. Alright, now everything looking kind of good. Maybe it needs to be a little bit higher. But that ear is way too low, and then the neck is a little bit too kind of to the side, and then the jaw is still a little bit too, you know, too much outwardly. So in here, making that ear smaller, and bringing the neck out a little bit, and then making the jaw kind of closer. Alright, let's check the guidelines. Alright, maybe this line in here, the lower part of the jaw needs to be just a slightly bit higher. Alright, I think that's good enough for us to continue further. Now let's do the nose. So in here we already have the base of the nose. We're trying to look at where it's really going to be the top of the nose. So this line right here, which is going to be what is the space between this eyebrow line and then the top of the nose. So this is the space. So I'm trying to imagine it in my own drawing. See, I think I put it too high, too high. So I'm going to put it lower, something like that. I'm going to try to see if it matches, you know, visually looking at the tracing, see if it matches. And then do the horseshoe shape. Try to imagine, you know, the angles. I'm looking now at the angle of the nose. So this line right here, I might go to the tracing. You can also put your stylus up to the monitor if you want. But you can just go to the tracing, do a long line, Control Z it. See, look at that angle for a couple of seconds, then bring back to your drawing, and then look at your angle. Does it really match? Now we have the arch. I'm gonna erase this line in the middle. Then I'm gonna go for the bottom plane, something like that. And see, because it's actually in the side view, that bottom plane is not just gonna be like this, but it's actually gonna be rotated to one side. Why? Because the nose is actually turning. So if the nose was straight, you know, from a front view, that line in the middle might just be like a curve like that. But as the nose is turning away from us, that curve is gonna become, I did the same mistake that I'm warning you about. That curve is getting more and more extreme on this side, right? And then in a profile view, it's completely going to be like this. So it's super extreme. So as the nose is turning away, be careful with that bottom curve, because that's really gonna show you the direction of the nose. So now in here, I'm looking at the angle of this. This is a really important angle. So this with the red is actually showing you kind of the corner of the nose. So I'm trying to match this angle with my angle. See, what's the differences in here? See, this is slightly going this way, and then mine is too high. Mine is kind of too vertical. So Control Z it, go back, and make it slightly going more horizontal. So now I have all these three angles. I'm looking if they're really matching the reference, kind of rotating. Look at the corner of the nose. See, is it really matching? Where is it really hitting that jaw? Is it hitting it at all? What's the space between the jaw and the nose? Is it kind of the same as our drawing? And I'm slowly building up my lines, right? But they're still kind of very faded, right? Like you see, they're not dark at all. All right, I think that's good enough for the nose. Now let's do the bowl of the mouth. Remember, it's staying in between these two arches, and it's usually going to wrap around right here. I'm gonna zoom in just to show you where it goes. So usually you might see like a crease in the person's face right here where the black line is, right here. So that's where that nose is going to be. It's usually going to be higher than the bottom of the nose. So it's going to wrap around something like this. And I'm just trying to imagine the chin as well. So as a second circle. Let's fix a little bit of this line. Yeah, I think this is pretty good. Let's check the guidelines. Let's check it on top of the reference. See, that ear is way too high still. Way too high, and then the jaw is still a little bit. See, the nose is a little bit too much to the left. So the nose needs to kind of go more towards the right. So I'm going to erase it, slightly push it to the right. And then the ear needs to be higher. So going this way, higher like this. And then the whole jaw. What is up with this angle? I thought it's good like that. What is you want? Alright. So slightly erasing it, moving it to the left. Make sure that with all this erasing and changing, you know, you don't fuck up some lines, because that's a really big possibility. Then check the corner of the jaw. In the guidelines, you can also do like a slight guideline for the corner of the jaw, which is going to be right here. See, mine, I could feel something was wrong with mine. You see, it's too low. So turning off this, erasing it, and putting it higher, and then repeating that line. All right, that's what we have until now. That's the kind of like the most simplified. Like if you looked at the PDF, I hope you did. You better look at the PDF. There's these 7 simplified forms in the human face. This right here is the most simplified forms in the human face. So until this stage, you need to have figured out all the proportions. You need to have pretty good lines. You need to make sure that everything is kind of tip top in order for you kind of to continue to the final lines. All right, now that we have this, let's move on to kind of like the eyeballs, and they're pretty hard. So starting out with fading away some of these lines right here and looking at where are the eyeballs sitting between these two lines. So I'm looking at, right now in my mind, what's happening is I'm looking at these two lines, right, with these black lines. Let's do another color. I'm looking at these green lines right here, and I'm looking at where are the eyeballs, right? So I'm looking at the tracing, and then I'm looking at the reference, and I'm looking at my freehand. I make a guess, right? I make a guess right here, and now I'm looking where is the eyeball. Is it overlapping with this bottom line? I look at the tracing. Yes, it is slightly overlapping. So we're good. What is the space between, or like with this green line, what is the space between the eyeball and then the eyebrow? Or there's like a slight space there. And then now I'm just kind of worried about having a good sort of a circle. So something like that. All right, we have the one eyeball done. So see, don't get too worried about like one eyeball until you really have both of them. So I'm not too worried about it making perfect, like, you know, making really, really good lines before I kind of build the other one, because it's always about the whole drawing. You know, it's not about just kind of like one thing. So because when you do the second eyeball, you might find that, you know, both of them look very wrong. And if you only do one and you perfect it, you draw the other one, it's just gonna, you know, all of a sudden it doesn't look that good. So see, I did kind of mistake in the tracing, that I should have continued this circle just to kind of see exactly how it overlaps with the nose. Actually, I think the angle of the nose is kind of wrong. Let's put it on top of the reference. Oops. All right, that jaw is still way too out. So the eyebrows need to go down, and then the nose is a little bit too much. All right, shit happens. So this needs to go down, and then this line right here needs to go inwardly even more, something like that. And then the eyebrow line needs to go down, something like that. And then this line like that. And the eyeball, now I'm looking at where is the eyeball compared to these other two lines of the cheekbone and then the eyebrow. How are they overlapping? How's it overlapping with the nose? I think this is actually pretty good. Now that we have the eyeballs, fading away this line, and I'm trying to break down this eyebrow into two separate parts. So building in two separate parts, the connection between the nose, and then I'm repeating my lines. So repeating my lines, kind of cleaning up this, repeating the eyeballs, boom, repeating this line right here, repeating this line, kind of repeating that line. So building it very slowly, right? And don't be worried if, you know, like, I don't know how long I've been drawing for, probably like 20-30 minutes. If this takes you, you know, 2 hours, 3 hours, you know, that's just how long it takes you. So, you know, that doesn't matter. It's all about just doing it slowly and just kind of understanding where each line goes, and, you know, developing your hand and eye coordination. All right, now that we have that, let's build up the lips. So the lips, I'm looking at the corner first. So I'm putting this dot right here to imagine the corner, then putting on the middle line, looking at the angle of the lips. So the angle of the lips, is it completely straight? Is it slightly going up? I think it's just super straight, but it's kind of like wrapping around just a tiny bit. And then I'm looking at the curve of the top lip. So on this side, it's slightly going that way, and then it's kind of curving this way, right? So up and then curve, right? It's not just a curve. Remember what we talked about in the lane. It's not just a curve like that, but it's more like just going this way. Flipping it back. Now just kind of building up this line, and then building up the bottom line. All right, let's do some guidelines to check. See, I did it pretty good. The nose is kind of in the right place. I think the eyeballs are way too high though. The eyeballs and the eyebrows are way too high. All right. So this actually needs to go down. And I think because we just have two good circles, you can kind of get away with just grabbing the last two a little bit, and then grabbing the other one, and then pushing both of them down, right? Just because everything is right, you know, according to angles, it was just that they were both too high. So I'm using the lasso tool and the moving tool to kind of like bring them down a little bit. Now let's do the guidelines again. I think this is good, but these two lines need to go lower. So I think when it comes to circles, you can use kind of the move tool, because building up circles can be a lot harder. But when it comes to lines, you know, just kind of you can just redraw them. But for circles, you can just kind of bring them down or something, because it's just gonna take you like way too long, and it's just not worth it. Now I'm building up the skull a little bit more, not losing that line, flipping it back, cleaning up this other line. Oh, by the way, I have, oh shit, I didn't even notice that this actually was standing in the way of the pixels of the brush. So you might have not even looked at my pixel of the brush. Thank God I saw that. But I should have seen it earlier. Alright, I'm cleaning up the back of the head a little bit. I'm not really happy with this ear. So something like that. Turning on guidelines. That eyebrow still way too high. This way too high. So a big mistake actually is when you kind of like get to these smaller planes and stuff, and like the smaller lines, if you're fixing only one side of the face, to actually mismatch the whole perspective on both sides of the face. So it's really important to actually always be aware that, you know, if you fix this line, how is it relating to that line over here? Like, is it still the same angle? Because if you only, like, look at what happens. If you only bring this line down, now he looks like he's doing this weird expression like, what's happening? So don't do that mistake. Like, just because you're like in the smaller lines, now fixing becomes a lot harder. So be very careful with that. I think this eyeball right here, I'd have to erase it because it's way too high. It's also way too big. So I'd have to go with like a smaller sort of a circle and a little bit lower as well. So just kind of erasing it, bringing it back, building up that circle, erasing even more, repeating my lines in here, and flipping it back. All right, let's check the nose, because I think, actually I'm sure this line is way too high. The bottom of the nose is way lower and it's way smaller. So I'm erasing this line. Then I'll need to continue this line all the way down. So at this point you have to imagine that all of the lines are actually connected to each other. So you no longer can just kind of fix one thing. So when you're fixing something, you need to be fixing everything in that area. And don't be afraid to do that. Like, remember, it's about you just kind of gaining you know, mileage. So the more you can kind of like notice your mistake and fix them before, you know, they get worse and worse, the better you're gonna become. All right, let's bring it on top of the reference. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of things in here that are kind of wrong. That nose, the whole nose is like slightly going to the left. It needs to go to the right, and then this neck over here is super busted. So the neck needs to go to the left, and then the whole nose, this whole area was way too much to the left. So it needs to go to the right. Oh yeah, that was definitely a mistake. See, that looks a lot better. Let's look at before and after. So see, that nose in here to here. You see that slight change in the angle of the nose? That was a big mistake. I could have even seen that if I didn't put it on top of the reference. All right. I think this is good for now. Now let's fix the lips a little bit more. Putting in a little bit, repeating remember what we talked about in the lay-in. You need to put a little bit more weight into the middle and into the corners. So I'm repeating those brush strokes more, and I'm kind of making them darker, and then I'm building this line onto the bottom, building up this first circle. Imagine how it's really wrapping around, and building up this chin circle. All right, pretty happy with this shit right here. Now the final things we need to add is the forehead circle, which is kind of hard to draw, but it's a good practice for you practicing circles. So it needs to kind of match the eyes. See, this is a pretty good one. And then erasing everything onto the sides like that, and then trying to match, you know, where it would really be sitting. Now trying to look at the hairline, I think that's where his hairline is going to be. I check with the guidelines. See, too high. This needs to go lower. This needs to be right here, right? Yeah, that's a lot better. So see, now that this is lower, actually the circle of the forehead needs to be smaller as well, because it's going to go to the hairline. So I'm erasing this forehead circle just so you can kind of match that first inline, this hairline in here. And don't get attached to any of your lines. Like, this is not the moment for you to like be like, oh, I like how this area looks. Like, no, any area in your whole drawing can be changed at any time. So don't get attached to any single area and be like, oh, I love what I did with this line. Like, fuck that line, it can be a lot better. So don't get too caught up in like the, you know, in your own kind of like pride and shit. Like, you have to let go of your lines constantly and think about the whole. Remember, this is the biggest principle you need to remember. It's about the whole drawing. It's not about like a single line. It's not about like a single area. It's about how does it look as a whole construction. Now in here for the ear, I do this thing where I actually do two lines, so something like that, just to show the three-dimensional form of the ear. So these two lines in here, so this and this line, they're gonna go to the point of this top line, which is gonna be the top of the ear. But you can also add a second line for the ear just to show this shit right here, this thing with the green. This is really the, if you touch your own ear, that's where people put piercings on and stuff, and it kind of shows the three-dimensional part of the ear. That's why I add the second line. Alright, and now all that's left is kind of doing this second mouth circle. Remember, see how I'm wrapping it around. I'm not doing this shit. I'm not going in and I'm just kind of like doing a C on this side and being like, oh, okay, that looks good enough. No, it doesn't look good enough because this is not going around. So you need to constantly go around. And when I'm going around, in order for me to not make a messy circle, I'm not pressing, you know, the same way on both sides, but I'm pressing harder on the left and then I'm pressing very lightly on the right, because I know on the right the circle is actually going to go outside of the face. So I'm pressing harder on the left side and I'm pressing very light onto the right, and I might erase that and kind of fix my circle. But it's important to kind of do the motion, you know, as if you're going around the whole thing, because if you don't, it just looks very flat. So if you just draw like this shit right here, it just looks very flat. So I'm doing the motion of going around, but I'm really just kind of being very careful that it's only on to the left. Alright, so something like that, and then the neck will be like this, and on to the bottom, need to match this. Alright, let's bring it back to the reference to see if our lines are pretty good. Alright, everything seems to be kind of matching. The nose in here, the top of the nose, see the top of the nose still needs a little bit more space, and then this eyebrow is way too high, and then this other eyebrow is a little bit too high, and then the neck still is too much to the right. Let's start out with the neck, too much to the right, need to go to the left. And then what was the other problem? The eyebrow was way too high. So actually you need to remember what we talked about into the laying, because I was just thinking, is it a problem me or is it something that in the measuring? But actually the thing is, you shouldn't follow exactly like the eyebrow, because if you do that, the eyebrow is in this direction, and remember, we're trying to think about this thing as a straight line. So it's much more important to actually capture the angle of both of these, so from corner to corner, than it is to capture the angle of the eyebrow, because the angle of the eyebrow will be going this way with the red, and then the green line is actually much more important. So it's still slightly important to kind of capture, you know, the feeling of this, but if you draw the line like that, he's gonna look very angry, right? And also you're not really gonna be thinking about the structure. You're gonna be thinking more about the hair, like the hair and stuff. So don't do that mistake. Just very gently think about the structure beneath that. But it's still too high though, so it's still gonna lasso this thing and bring it lower, and then lasso this thing on the left because it's actually connected, bring it lower as well, because now we're in that final stage, so we can't make like slight adjustments unless we kind of use some tools and stuff. And you know, it's not like, you know, it's not the best thing to do because we don't really get any mileage out of that, but you know, it's better to do it and have a better drawing than not do it and just end up with the mistakes. So, you know, sometimes using tools can be useful, but at the beginning, practice more without tools. All right, let's check it again. I still don't like that jaw and then the eyebrow and the nose. So the nose in here needs to go out more, so something like that, and then the jaw needs to come in like that. All right, let's check. Oh, this is pretty good now. All right, that eyeball is hitting the arch, the lips, everything is aligned. All right, so I think we're good to go with kind of like finalizing our lines and kind of making them quote unquote pretty. So after you're very sure of your proportions, you can afford to slightly zoom in. So not the way all the way in here, but you know, you can kind of see how I was drawing. The way I was drawing is I could see all three of these references without any problem, and I'll not zoom in. When I'm doing like quote unquote a pretty stage, I might kind of like see only two of the references, but I'm still not going to zoom all the way in here because then you're going to lose sight of the bigger picture. So somewhere in here is a good place. Now what our goal is to really make this presentable. So I'm going over all of the lines and I'm kind of cleaning them up, and I'm kind of like trying to keep all of the positions that I had. We actually forgot about this line over here for the bridge of the nose to kind of make it more three-dimensional. And the goal is to really make the lines look very kind of clean, not perfect, and we're also not starting like a new layer. You know, we're doing the same layer and we're just kind of cleaning up our brush strokes and just kind of making it, you know, look good. So a lot of people, when they get to this stage, they kind of panic because, you know, they're like, oh, I already gave it my best. Like, I don't really have any much more to give, you know, like, how am I going to make these better? And at the beginning, that might be true. Like, if you're just starting out, you might not know even how to make it better. So that's what I talked about in the, you know, in the final lessons of the lane in the previous video, is that in the beginning, it's much more about quantity. So in the beginning, if you don't know how to really make it pretty, just give it to, you know, to the right proportions, get it to the best lines you can, and then just move up to the next one. But if you've been doing this for a while and you know you've done at least 20-30, you can kind of like really get up on your lines and start really repeating them and using the eraser and just kind of cleaning them up, right? And be very careful to not actually ruin the proportions and then ruin the structure of the lines in here, because that's another thing that I'm seeing is a lot of people, they start, you know, cleaning up and cleaning their lines, and they just completely change their positions. Because when you have a line like this, right, look at the position of this line. So let's actually copy paste it so it can actually show you something real quick. So this green line is where our line was. So let's say you're trying to clean up this line. So in the process of you cleaning up this line, you're like, oh yes, I'm cleaning it up, I'm erasing it, I'm, you know, making it blah blah blah. And in the process of you cleaning up that up, because you're erasing a lot more from the right and then you're putting your brush strokes inner center, you actually move this line. So bring the green line back. You know, remember this was a copy paste. Look at how much this line has moved. You've moved this line in the process of you actually erasing and then cleaning up your lines. So it's really important that when you clean up your lines and, you know, you have a line and then you erase it on one side and on the other and you put another line, it's really important to remember where was the position of that original line. And one thing I recommend you is, if you go to the history, right here in this little camera, there's this thing called a screenshot, or actually a snapshot. So when you press the snapshot, it actually shows you, you know, the previous stage that your drawing was in, so you can kind of go back and forth and check. And this is actually the, you know, the freehand drawing that I did before the video without really talking. So you can kind of see how it has a little bit more, you know, changes and stuff. And we're gonna go in and try to just continue to build up our lines. Now I'm doing the stage of, you know, really making my lines prettier. I might afford to kind of get a smaller brush and really finesse my lines, but make sure that you don't make them too dark or you don't make them too messy. You know, sometimes it also might take for you to kind of like, I feel like my lines are a little bit, because, you know, when I'm talking, obviously my drawing is not going to be as good. So I think when I'm drawing, I have the tendency to make my lines like slightly darker and like slightly blurrier. So I'd be careful with doing that. So if you look at the freehand drawing that I did before the video, you can kind of see how it's a lot more crisp. And then when I'm talking, because I'm not really as focused, because I have to talk and stuff, everything is like a lot more, you know, slightly softer and like slightly more blurry and stuff. It's still like, that's still like an acceptable lay-in, but I'm just talking, I'm just saying, like, you know, in terms of really good lines, you want them to be slightly, you know, more crisper and than the ones that I have right now. Alright, so I think that's a pretty good lay-in for the 3/4 view, just kind of finalizing some touches. And I'm actually going to include the PSD of this file down below this video, so make sure you download this PSD and actually look at, I'm going to include this drawing because it's actually better than this one right here. And look at this drawing, look at the different lines, look at the different angles, and I want you to, when you're doing your own drawings, to constantly look at this and try to analyze the lines, try to analyze. Seeing here, I actually did the slightly, you know, the mouth going slightly outward, you know, so in here, the bow, I actually make it kind of slightly outward going. I kind of forgot about that. And also, you know, even though I'm like so obsessed with like measuring my proportions and all that stuff, you can kind of see how I did the same reference and it looks slightly different. So this and this kind of have some slightly different, you know, proportions, slightly different curves. So it's not like, you know, it's not on life or death. Like, I'm not expecting you guys to have like a copy, like everybody to have the same exact drawing. You know, there might be slight changes, but it's about, you know, understanding the balance of getting your proportions right, because a lot of people don't really care about proportions at all. So that's why I'm being so forceful when it comes to proportions, because people really don't care about them. So I'm trying to show you the importance, but you know, you also shouldn't be expected to make the same exact drawing as me, like a complete copy. You know, like, I understand that it might be slightly different, and that's totally okay. So this is it for this video, and let's move on to the next angle.